The road ahead of us was empty. No houses, no streetlights, only the abandoned concrete structures of the old ammunition plant disappearing into the darkness. Then the headlights caught something beside the road. At first, I thought it was a man. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, with its shoulders drawn inward and something folded against its back. Then it turned toward us. 2 red lights appeared where its face should have been, not glowing like lamps, reflecting, watching. We accelerated. The figure moved. Its wings opened without a sound, and somehow, without running, it rose above the road. We pushed the car past 90 miles an hour. It stayed with us. Every time I looked back, those red eyes were still there. And according to the people inside that car, this was not a nightmare. It was the beginning of the Mothman case. On the night of November 15, 1966, 2 young couples were driving near an abandoned military complex outside Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The area was locally known as the TNT plant. During the Second World War, the site had been used to manufacture and store explosives. By 1966, much of it had been abandoned. Concrete bunkers, contaminated ponds, and service roads stretching through hundreds of acres of forest. According to the account later reported in the local press, the 4 witnesses encountered a large, gray, human-shaped creature near the plant. They described powerful wings folded against its back and large red eyes that became visible when illuminated by the car's headlights. They fled toward Point Pleasant. The creature, they said, followed them. The next day, the Point Pleasant Register published a story under a headline that described what they had seen not as a moth, but as a man-sized bird or unidentified creature. The word Mothman would come later, and it would transform one frightening encounter into one of America's most persistent modern legends. The West Virginia Encyclopedia records approximately 26 reported sightings over the following year, most centered around Point Pleasant and the abandoned TNT facility. The basic report is easy to summarize. 4 people saw something unusual. They interpreted it as a large, winged creature. They became frightened and drove away. But almost immediately, the story began to expand. Additional residents reported red lights in the sky. Others claimed that television sets malfunctioned, telephones behaved strangely, or unidentified visitors began asking questions around town. Some witnesses described a creature with a man-like body. Others described something far more bird-like. Some said it flapped its wings. Others insisted the wings never moved. Some reports placed the eyes in a recognizable head. Other retellings gave the creature no visible head at all, only 2 red eyes embedded in its chest. This variation does not automatically prove that every witness was mistaken, but it creates a serious investigative problem. When a strange event becomes public, later testimony no longer develops in isolation. Every newspaper article, rumor, and conversation gives future witnesses a template through which to interpret something ambiguous. A large bird seen before the story exists is simply a large bird. A large bird seen after an entire town begins discussing a red-eyed flying creature may become something else. I was driving alone when I saw it standing near the road. The shape was taller than any bird I knew. Its body was gray. Its wings were folded behind it. I slowed down. That was when it looked directly at me. The eyes were red, so bright that for a moment I could see nothing else. Then it lifted into the air. I did not hear wings beating. I only remember the feeling that followed. Not surprise, not curiosity, dread. Accounts like this became central to the legend, but precise details differ depending on the source and how many years had passed before the story was recorded again. That matters because memory is not a video recording. A frightened witness may honestly remember an event while still being wrong about its size, speed, or distance. Darkness removes scale. Headlights create glare. Fear narrows attention. And reflective eyes can become the most memorable part of an animal whose body was never clearly seen. The most common natural explanation is that witnesses encountered an unusually large bird. One early candidate was the sandhill crane. A sandhill crane can stand several feet tall, has an impressive wingspan, and possesses an area of reddish skin around its eyes. Seen unexpectedly in darkness, at close range and outside the observer's expectations, it could appear strange. But the crane explanation is not perfect. Critics note that sandhill cranes were not commonly associated with that precise area, and some witness descriptions do not closely match a crane's body or flight. Another possibility is a large heron. Herons have long legs, broad wings, and an awkward silhouette when disturbed at night. However, neither cranes nor herons perfectly explain every version of the testimony. The strongest candidate may be a nocturnal bird of prey. Owls can appear deceptively large because their feathers expand their silhouette. Their wings are broad. Their flight is nearly silent. When an owl is illuminated by headlights or a flashlight, its eyes can produce intense eye shine. Depending on angle, lighting, and species, that reflection may appear orange or red. Audubon examined the possibility that a barred owl or another large owl could account for important features of the Mothman reports: silent flight, a large apparent body, and striking eyeshine visible in darkness. Skeptical researchers have similarly argued that some sightings may involve owls, cranes, herons, or a combination of misidentified animals rather than a single unknown creature. But a natural candidate does not resolve every detail. It only asks a more useful question: how many extraordinary details were visible during the encounter, and how many appeared as the story was retold? One of the most dramatic elements of the original case is the claim that the creature pursued the witness's vehicle at extremely high speed. Versions of the account often describe the car traveling close to 100 miles per hour while the creature remained nearby. Taken literally, that would appear to rule out almost any ordinary bird. But speed estimation at night is unreliable. A nearby object moving across the visual field can seem faster than a distant one. A bird may disappear into darkness, then become visible again farther along the road. Several separate sightings can feel like one continuous pursuit, and once fear takes control, the witness is not carefully measuring distance or calculating velocity. This does not mean the witnesses lied. A person can truthfully report what an experience felt like without providing a physically accurate measurement of what occurred. That distinction is essential. Experience is evidence of an experience. It is not proof of physics. The setting contributed almost as much to the legend as the creature itself. The TNT area was already an ideal landscape for a modern monster. It contained deserted industrial structures, storage bunkers, wetlands, and forest. The remains of wartime production gave the site an atmosphere of secrecy. Local rumors eventually connected the creature to contaminated land, military experiments, or something accidentally created inside the abandoned facility. There is no reliable evidence that the United States government engineered a winged humanoid at Point Pleasant, but the location made that theory emotionally persuasive. The Cold War had trained Americans to imagine hidden experiments behind fences. Radiation, chemical waste, and military secrecy occupied the public imagination. Place a strange silhouette inside that environment, and a mistaken animal no longer feels like an animal. It feels like something that escaped. The Mothman narrative soon grew beyond reports of a creature. Writer John Keel arrived in the region and began collecting accounts involving unidentified aerial objects, strange telephone behavior, prophetic dreams, and mysterious men dressed in dark clothing. These elements later became a major part of his 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies. Keel did not interpret the events as a straightforward zoological mystery. For him, Mothman was connected to a wider pattern of paranormal activity, something capable of manipulating perception, creating fear, and perhaps anticipating catastrophe. The book gave the story a structure it had not possessed during the earliest reports. The creature was no longer simply something seen near an abandoned plant. It became a messenger, a warning, an omen. But the strongest connection between Mothman and disaster would emerge only after Point Pleasant experienced a real tragedy. 13 months after the best-known encounter, Point Pleasant was crowded with holiday traffic. It was December 15, 1967. The Silver Bridge carried U.S. Route 35 across the Ohio River, connecting Point Pleasant, West Virginia, with the Ohio side. At approximately 5 in the afternoon, during heavy traffic, the bridge failed. The roadway folded into the river. Vehicles fell with it. 46 people died. 2 of the victims were never recovered. The disaster was not unexplained. The National Transportation Safety Board investigated the collapse and traced the initial failure to a defect in a suspension chain eye-bar. A small crack developed in a critical component that was difficult to inspect using the technology available at the time. Because the bridge lacked structural redundancy, the failure of one key element triggered the collapse of the entire structure. The bridge did not collapse because of a flying creature. It collapsed because of a catastrophic engineering failure, and yet the timing transformed Mothman forever. The sightings had begun little more than a year before the disaster. After the bridge collapsed, people began asking whether the creature had appeared to warn the town. Some versions claimed Mothman was seen near the bridge. Others suggested its appearance predicted the deaths. The most powerful interpretation was not that the creature caused the disaster, but that it knew the disaster was coming. That idea raises an obvious question. If Mothman was a warning, what exactly was the warning? Most witnesses did not report a message about the Silver Bridge. No public statement warned drivers to stay away. No specific day or time was communicated. If a warning is unreadable until after 46 people die, it serves no protective function. It is only a story humans create afterward to find intention inside tragedy. Imagine that unusual sightings occur for an entire year. Nothing happens after most of them. Then one major disaster strikes the same community. The sightings that preceded the disaster suddenly appear predictive. The sightings that did not correspond to anything are forgotten. This is not necessarily deception. It is selection. We remember the coincidence that became meaningful. We ignore the coincidences that led nowhere. And the Silver Bridge tragedy was powerful enough to reorganize every strange report that came before it. The red eyes, the abandoned plant, the unidentified lights, and the rumors of warnings became chapters in one unified story. But that unified story was assembled after the ending was already known. The idea that Mothman served as an omen was especially popularized through Keel's later interpretation of the events rather than established by the engineering investigation or by a specific, verifiable warning delivered before the collapse. Skeptics sometimes reduce the case to one sentence. They saw an owl. That may be possible, but it is also too simple. The Mothman case was not one controlled observation. It was a collection of reports made by different people in different conditions over many months. Some witnesses may have seen owls, others may have seen cranes, herons, or ordinary aircraft. Some reports may have been influenced by the newspaper stories. Some may have been jokes. Some may have become exaggerated through repetition. And a small number may remain difficult to reconstruct because too little reliable information survives. We do not need one creature to explain every sighting. The assumption that all reports must share a single cause is part of what keeps the legend alive. What people call the Mothman case may be several unrelated events compressed into one narrative. A bird beside a road, an unusual light, a shadow over a field, a rumor repeated in a frightened town, and later a bridge collapse that gave all of those memories a single shape. The modern image of Mothman is often insect-like, a muscular humanoid with enormous moth wings and blazing red eyes. But the earliest public descriptions were less definite. The original newspaper framing emphasized a man-sized bird or bird-like creature. The insectoid form became clearer as illustrations, books, films, and popular culture standardized the legend. That evolution matters. Monsters become easier to remember when they have a stable design. The witness sees something incomplete. The newspaper gives it a name. The artist gives it a body. The author gives it meaning. The film gives it a voice. Eventually, the cultural image becomes more vivid than the original testimony. Point Pleasant has since embraced Mothman as part of its local identity through a museum, public art, and an annual festival. What began as a period of fear has become a form of community folklore and tourism. But celebration does not answer the original question. What did those four people see on the night of November 15th, 1966? There are four broad explanations. 1. An unknown animal. This interpretation accepts the testimony largely as reported. A large, unidentified flying creature appeared near Point Pleasant. The difficulty is physical evidence. No body was recovered. No clear photograph was produced. No feathers, tracks, or biological samples have been reliably connected to the creature. 2. A misidentified known animal. An owl, crane, heron, or other large bird could explain the wings, silent movement, and reflective eyes. The difficulty is that no single species perfectly matches every reported detail, but that may not be necessary if the details changed through fear and retelling. 3. Social contagion and folklore. An initial ambiguous encounter gained publicity. Later residents interpreted unrelated sights through the developing Mothman story. This explains why reports multiplied and why the creature's form became more standardized, but it cannot tell us exactly what triggered the first encounter. 4. Something paranormal, an omen, interdimensional being, or intelligence connected to the Silver Bridge disaster. This explanation accounts for the emotional structure of the legend, but it has the weakest testable evidence. It begins where documentation ends. The Mothman case contains a real town, real witnesses, real newspaper reports, and a real disaster that killed 46 people. But those facts do not automatically prove the legend built around them. The Silver Bridge collapse has a documented engineering cause. The alleged warning remains an interpretation. The red eyes may have been eyeshine. The silent wings may have belonged to an owl. The impossible speed may have been a frightened estimate made on a dark road. And yet none of those explanations can reconstruct every second of what the witnesses experienced. That uncertainty is where Mothman survives. Not necessarily in the abandoned bunkers outside Point Pleasant, not above the Ohio River, but in the distance between an event and the story we build to explain it. Perhaps the witnesses encountered an animal they could not identify. Perhaps fear altered what they saw. Perhaps the town's separate anxieties merged into one creature. Or perhaps, as believers still argue, something appeared before the disaster and vanished when its warning was complete. We can document the bridge. We can study the birds. We can trace the development of the legend. What we cannot do is return to that road in November 1966 and stand inside the headlights. So the question remains, what followed that car out of the darkness? A predator? A mistaken bird? A modern legend? Or something that Point Pleasant was never supposed to understand? Tell us what explanation you find most convincing. And subscribe to Threshold Obscura for restrained investigations into cryptids, unexplained events, folklore, and the evidence behind the story.